My name is Ian, and I'm an alcoholic. You know, I chose that portion of the big book, for a couple of reasons. One was, one was the fact that I love the way that the big book it words things, the way it says things, the evil corroding thread. You know, the fabric of our lives was shot through with it. And it's very descriptive, right? You think of a tapestry, if you were to imagine like a tapestry of your life, and then you just notice this corroding black thread just weaving through every section of it. And that was my life, you know, and I love the way the big book words things. And so my sobriety date is August 28th of 2015. By the grace of God, if I make it to this August, I'll have 10 years. And I got sober at 25 years old. I don't know why that's funny, but it's just, so I'm going to try and paint the picture of unmanageability in a young, like 25-year-old's life. And, you know, through that, you know, I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, my life at that time, I did inhale. So you might hear some things that are outside issues. But my goal is to not talk about drugs any more than it is to not talk about alcohol. Because, you know, those things were the solutions to my problems. My real problem was alcoholism. You know, selfishness, self-centeredness, resentment, and fear, right? Those were the big driving motivators of my life, right? My entire life. You know, as far back as I can remember, I was always afraid. And because of that fear, you know, and of course I was so afraid to let you know that I was afraid, so no one knew I was afraid. And that usually came off as egoism, big shotism, or, you know, just insanity, right? and it's just, nothing ever fit. Nothing was ever right. You know, and that fear and all that stuff, it cropped up pretty early on. My biggest fear was I wanted everyone to like me, and I didn't want you to know me, because if you knew me, you wouldn't like me. So I lied a lot about who I was or how big of a person I was, and I wanted people to think I was larger than life, because I knew if you knew the real me, you would hate me, right? Just the sentence that I just said, you could tell made for perfect drinking. Just the insanity that went through my head at any given moment. Like, I would manifest the perfect reason to continue drinking, drugging, or whatever it was. Like, I remember as a kid, like, I was super skinny, so I got bullied. And then I got really fat, and I continued to get bullied. Like, my entire life. Like, and I was just trying to mold myself and to be someone who was noticeable enough for you to like me, but not noticeable enough so I could keep my head down because of how afraid I was. And you know, that's at a pretty young age. I remember I started smoking pot when I was 12 years old, and instantly I was like, man, those dudes at Dare, they got it all wrong. You know, how could something that is supposedly so bad make me feel like I can tackle the world? You know, a lot of great speakers, Mickey Bush, he would always talk about, what does he say? Alcohol is the thing that can make a pigeon feel like an eagle. You know, I love that because it was so true. And then, you know, I started selling weed at 12, 13. And, you know, I'm a kid. I didn't have a lot of friends. And I hated the popular kids because they didn't want to be my friend. And I hated my friends because they weren't the popular kids. Like, you know, my life, it was just one big contradiction after another, filled with resentment, misunderstanding, and not satisfied with what was. You know, I did not live in a realm of acceptance ever in my entire life, which again made for the perfect reason to drink, drug, whatever, because that's my problem. My problem isn't alcohol or drugs. My problem is my average state of being is untenable. I'd like to say that again. My average state of being is unacceptable. So I will do whatever it takes to not be. The book talks about, blotting out my existence. Like, that's all I ever wanted to do. And that's how I know I'm an alcoholic. Not because of how I drank, what I drank, because what my life looks like when I'm not drinking. When I'm not drinking, a normal person, they drink, they get a DUI, something happens, right? And they'll put the thing down, and then they'll go off to college, and they'll skip off to the sober sunset, and they just don't think about it ever again. Me, the worst things on the planet could happen to me, and 5 minutes later, I'm using again. Because my current circumstances, it's impossible. I don't know how to live. And that's my problem. I don't have a drug or alcohol problem. I have a sobriety problem. I have a problem living a life that works sober. And I deep down, I feel like I knew that at a very young age. But I'm never going to admit to you that I have a problem, because if I admit to you that I have a problem, that makes the problem real. And if the problem's real, I have to think about it. And you're noticing that I'm talking really fast when I'm letting you know the things that are going through my head, because that's exactly what it sounds like. It's just these racing thoughts, and it goes from tangent to tangent, right? That's why the steps were so important to me. I didn't know it at the time. I got politely invited to AA at a pretty young age. And I remember a friend of mine got a DUI. I'll preface the story of how he got the DUI because it's rather hilarious. We were in his car, he was driving drunk, I was drunk, and right off the bat, it's a bad idea, but that's perfectly normal in our line of work, right? And we pull up to a McDonald's, and he specifically requested no pickles on his burger. They had put pickles on his burger. So he hops out of the car and starts screaming at the drive-thru lady, "I'll save you the expletives," but he politely asked her to please take the pickles off his burger. She then says, "I'm calling the cops," and he says, "Great, call them. I'm not leaving," blah, blah, blah. And he turns to me and says, "Ian, you should probably go. The cops are on their way." So I walk, he gets arrested, and then he's required to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I think this is when I was like 16 or something like that. And I go to AA, and I see all these people, and I was so stuck in here, I couldn't hear a message. I couldn't hear what you guys were saying, right? I couldn't hear anything about peace, hope, happiness. I didn't hear any of that. All I saw, and this is where the perception of alcoholism, the disease of alcoholism comes into play, right? I didn't see you guys for what you really were. I didn't see or hear the words coming out of your mouth talking about peace, happiness, and serenity, a new way of living. I was so stuck inside me, filled with prejudice towards the words God, spirituality, even the word happiness, that I just looked at you guys as, these are just people who failed at drinking. They just don't know how to drink right, or they're just so far down the rabbit hole, they really need religion, which is what I viewed AA as, religion, dogma, or whatever, right? And so I left. For my entire life, I had the great opportunity, and I had every advantage awarded to me on a silver platter, right? Like, I always got great grades. I was on academic decathlon. I got the opportunity to study in England, university out there. And, I got expelled in high school for selling weed. But my parents were like, well, he's got great grades. It's just a phase, right? And it was so awesome to get expelled, right? Because I got expelled, and then I went to the bad high school. And high school it was junior high. Junior high rumors, right? I step into this new school, and I'm the expelled kid, and everyone's like, "You see that dude, Ian? He's a murderer. He's a big-time gangster, man. I heard he killed people and was selling crack. He was Pablo Escobar." And I didn't correct them because I loved it. It was great. I was popular. I had girlfriends and I was selling weed and I was like, this is the life, right? But then I had to like live up to that reputation. And that's not who I am, but I'm so afraid of you finding out who I really am. I'm going to do my best to live up to that reputation. And so on and so forth. I went to college. I was studying in that school in England. And the entire time, I'm just drinking and drugging my life away. And then it was so funny that, so it was the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts that I went to in England. And in order to get into the master's program, you have to perform a piece, right? And if you do well at it, you get to go on. So the character and the play that I had to perform was an alcoholic cokehead. I nailed it. I nailed it. It was great. Talk about method acting, right? It's for real. Like all I did was get drunk and do coke, and I did really well at it. And then so they invited me back to the 4 years master program, and all I had to do was make it 1 year until the next school thing started. So I went back to LA. I got a job at a production company. I didn't make it. You know, my drinking, my drugging quickly ramped up, and I was doing a lot of other things. So much so I got fired. You know, my life burned to the ground very quickly. You know, for some people, it's this very like slow, drawn out process. Not me. I feel like I started blinking and I was homeless in downtown Los Angeles. It's funny now. You can laugh. It's okay. No, it's weird. I feel like I closed my eyes and opened them split second, and my family hated me. I had no friends. I was homeless in downtown Los Angeles, addicted to every drug you can think of, and drinking, and then of course, you know, you get involved with the crowd that's around there, and before you know it, like I'm committing major crimes and, you know, and just all this other stuff. And that's the one thing I want to point out about Alcoholics Anonymous. If you look at me today, normal people look at me today and they don't see the person that I'm trying to describe to you guys. They don't see it. I tell people, you know, the story of my life, and they look at me. And I remember I was sharing my story years ago, and just like this, and I heard off in the corner, someone was like, that dude never did any of that. And at first, you know, my ego was bruised. So I'm like, don't you know who I am? And then the second thought passed through my head was, wow, that is awesome. That is amazing. That people look at me today and they don't see the shaved head, 135-pound walking felony. You know, they don't see that. And that's the miracle of this thing. If anything else, you know, and so on and off homeless. I went to treatment 6 times, more sober livings than I can count, more detoxes than I care to remember. And you know, every time I would call my family, right? Please, I'm ready to get sober. I'm willing to do it and give it a shot. Please. You know, and every time and it was mainly just because I was hungry or needed money, or I just wanted to get off the street for like a little bit. I didn't actually care about being homeless, or maybe I did, but that bug wore off within 48 hours. That's why they call this a disease of amnesia, right? I have had the worst thing. I've had so many horrible things happen to me, but within 48 hours, I forget about it. A normal person has a horrible thing happen to them. The normal person goes, man, I probably shouldn't put myself in that position anymore. Not me. I forget about those things so quickly. And I try to manipulate. I try to manage. I try to manage my drinking, my life, my emotions. Like, that's the whole point of this. I'm trying to manage my emotional nature. But the problem with that is the more I try to manage my own life, the more it seems to break. And that's what it talks about in the first steps. It's one part, but I like to break it up in two parts, the two parts of the first step, right? I'm powerless over alcohol, and my life had become unmanageable. What that means to me, my life is unmanageable whether I am drunk or sober. It took me forever to really get that. And I would always think, no, it's the drugs, it's whatever. If I just stop doing this, if I stop drinking this much, or if I only do scotch, if I don't do scotch, but I do brandy, if I mix liquor and milk, like all the different crazy things that I think I can do to manage my life and manage my substance abuse or whatever the case, like I can maintain. I was like a pharmacologist trying to find the perfect mix that was going to make Ian the best version of Ian possible. But I could never get it right. God. And I'll fast forward through a lot of this because it's, my entire life was dictated based off what you guys thought of me. And a lot of that fear still carries over today. So I was in a very abusive first relationship in junior high, right? I'm a horrible speller. There we go, I said it. I'm a horrible speller. No, it's not that. I'm just a bad speller. And I had this girl, I couldn't even spell my girlfriend at the time's name. And I don't think I'm a bad speller, I'm just a nervous speller. And so if I see someone like looking at me try and write something, I just lose all thought process of how to spell. And I had this girlfriend who was physically and emotionally abusive, and she would make me write her name over and over again. And then I got so stressed about it that I just like couldn't spell. And it was Daniela. Like it wasn't even that difficult of a name. But and like those fears and all those things, like because of that, I didn't take tests. I skipped school. And that's what I'm talking about. The fear of what you guys thought of me. I remember, speaking of glasses, I didn't want to wear glasses until high school. I was born blind, legitimately. I was legally born blind, right? I had a bunch of surgeries I was taken care of, but I had to wear glasses from a young age, but I didn't want to wear them in school because I didn't want people to make fun of me. I remember I didn't want to take a coding class in high school because I thought people would think I was a nerd. Do you know what kind of life I would have if I knew how to code in C++ right now? You know what job? I'd be working at Google. Probably not, but that my whole life was dictated by fear, resentment, selfishness, and self-centeredness, right? And that's me trying to manage my emotional state of being. So, just before August of 2015, my girlfriend had just died. I'm living in a crack house in Santa Ana. If anyone knows where that is, wonderful place, downtown Cypress Street. You should totally go. And I don't know, like a bunch of worse things in my life had happened to me at that point. But this one, it wasn't even like my bottom. But I could literally I heard something break inside me. Like I literally heard it. I don't know, to this day I have no idea what it was. And I remember I called my sister. She hung up on me. And I called her like over and over and over again. And then she finally picked up. She's like, Ian, what the hell do you want? Normally when I call a family member looking for help, I'm crying, crocodile tears, manipulating, or it's going to be different this time, I promise, or please, like I'm whatever, blah. Like this time around, and the book talks about this, like I spoke in a way that only the dying could relate to. Like I remember this just like it was yesterday. In the most monotone voice you could think of, I was just like, hey, Emily, I'm willing to do whatever you tell me to do. Like the fight had left me. The big book talks about we cease fighting everything and everyone. Like I had lost the drive to try and manipulate myself into thinking I could fix myself. That was gone. I don't know where it went. I really don't know how. I don't know. But I was just so broken that, I mean, I at that point, I've died 3 times. Like, I didn't know. Like, I was literally like in limbo, right? Like, I didn't know how, you hear the saying all the time, I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to die. But like, it's so true. Like, I just was like, I don't, and at this point, like, I didn't know if I believed in God, and if I did believe in God, I just felt like he either forgot about me or hated me. You know, I needed, and that was the thing that kind of kept me away from AA for a long time, is because I needed a real fix in my life. I didn't need your hocus pocus, read a book and everything's going to be better, right? Like, I needed a lobotomy, I needed pills, psychotherapy, electroshock treatment. Like, I needed someone literally with a baseball bat to just beat me upside the head until I was fixed. Because I didn't know, like, there was nothing on this earth, no human power that was going to fix me, right? And then I remember my dad, my sister had told my parents, hey, I think Ian needs help. And my parents are like, no shit. Like, no kidding. Sorry for cursing. Apologies. But then she heard me, and she heard it so well, she was able to pass that along to my parents. And she said, no, like, I don't know. There's something in his voice. There's something he needs something. And I told them, hey, listen, I will go wherever you want me to go. I will do whatever you want me to do. I do not care anymore. The only request I have is that you get me out of California. It was the only, people say, oh, you're taking a geographic, and no matter where you go, there you are. You're like, well, it worked for me, okay? But no, I just knew everybody, like, literally from San Francisco to San Diego, like, that was my life. Just driving back and forth, driving. I don't need to tell you what I was doing, but I drove a lot. And so it's like, I literally just told them, like, hey, like, send me to Alaska. Send me to Mars. I don't care where you send me. Send me to the freaking middle of nowhere until I learn how to live again, because I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm so grateful that, because this thing, the window of opportunity of this thing working is so small. It's so small. I remember I would get into a treatment center with such willingness to be like, yeah, I'm going to get a sponsor. I'm going to work the steps in one day. I need this. I'm going to die. And I would have the willingness to want to change, and my family's tears and pleads of, just all of that. And I would be so willing to change. And then 24 hours would go by. And then I remember, like, I left detox one time and I got to a sober living. I watched one episode of Game of Thrones because they had free HBO, and I'm not going to pass that up. And I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. So my dad picks me up in downtown Santa Ana. It was hilarious because he's like a quintessential suburban white guy, and the whole block's like whistling. He's on the block. And I'm like, no, it's not a detective. That's my dad. So he picks me up, and I detox cold turkey on his floor for 7 days. And I just didn't even care. I was just so broken. I didn't even care anymore. Unmanageability, right? And then, but of course, and they say, you're going to Utah. And I'm like, where the hell is that? But I didn't care. Like I said, send me to Alaska, send me to Mars. I don't care. Like, I am so done wasting my life. I am so done being afraid. I'm so done. And I didn't even have those thoughts. I literally was just broken. I had nothing left, right? But of course, what do you guys think I did before I got on that plane? Yeah, definitely. For anyone who didn't hear that, he said stayed sober. That's exactly what happened. No, and that's what I mean. Like, no matter how much this thing is taken from me, I let it take from me. No matter how the horrible things it brought upon my life, no matter the want of how much I wanted to change, it was not enough. Powerless, unmanageability. The spiritual defense was there. Lack of power was my dilemma. If I had the power and the ability to change my life, I should have done so years ago. But I lack the power. So I get to Utah, and luckily enough, the treatment center I went to, 95% of the dudes there were serious about this thing, which saved my life. Because so many times I'd go to a treatment center, and all it would take is one dude to be like, yeah, I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm like, you know what? I don't either. That's literally all it would take. You didn't have to twist my arm. But I was so grateful. Like, that's how serious the group, and the group that I was in treatment with, 95% of us were really serious, so much so, like, everyone would sneak into our room, and we would have a big book study in the middle of the night, which was really weird. Like, the night person who would watch over us would break into the room, like, what's going on here? Like, we're just reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He's like, I'll just keep it down. Out of those serious guys, 2 of us are still sober, including me. Yeah. That's why it's like, I don't care how, I just needed to do this. And I didn't even choose my sponsor, right? My roommate, he's actually dead now. He's the one who introduced me to my sponsor, which was crazy because that guy, he just grabbed me in a meeting and just walked me right up to my now sponsor and said, this is your sponsor. Do what he says. I've had sponsors in the past, but I didn't really utilize them. I didn't follow their direction. And, I would not follow their direction, and then I would relapse. Then I would say, see, AA doesn't work. This guy, I don't know what it was. He just said, hey, my name's Ian. Can you sponsor me? And he said, yeah, I read the first 164 pages of the big book. If you can do that, I will sponsor you. I went back to the treatment center, and I read 164 pages in that night because my schedule was pretty open. I had nothing. The last thing my dad told me when he dropped me off at the airport at LAX, he said, Ian, I love you. You're my only son. Never call me again. Rightfully so. He dropped me off, and I went on my merry way. Then I got into the steps, and I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in spirituality, but at this point, I needed hope. I needed to believe that there was a semblance and I didn't even know if this thing was going to work, but I just did it anyways, right? I did it anyways because my best ideas sucked, and I didn't know what else to do. The weirdest thing happened. I woke up one day, and I had 6 months sober, and I was in my own apartment. This is actually when me and Brantley lived together. This is great. Woke up, and I just remembered, 6 months sober, I was in my own apartment. I had worked the steps. I'm sponsoring guys. And, God, it's the weirdest thing. I was like, holy hell, I woke up happy. That was so foreign to me. That's how strange of a feeling it was. It was so foreign to wake up okay. And this, people talk about the white light burning bush moment in recovery, right? That wasn't the case for me, right? This thing happened so slowly and gradually that I didn't even know it was happening. To the point where I woke up one day, 6 months sober, in my own apartment where I had moved in with a couple other friends in recovery, and I realized, man, for the past couple of months, I've been waking up happy. And I didn't even realize it. And that's all I ever wanted. That's literally it. That's why I drank my life away, because me sober I couldn't tolerate it. That's why I sought to manage my feelings, my perception in a bottle. But that's the issue. When I drink, I lose all power of choice, and you guys won't see me for a year, if you ever see me again. But it's like I did this thing. I did the 12 steps, and I was sponsoring other guys, not because I believed in this thing, just because I tried everything else. And it seemed to be working. And that was the day I bought in. There's a great speaker, Ronald White, not the comedian, but he's an AA speaker. And he said something in one of his speaker tapes. He said it, and I've heard it a million times, but the way he said it, I don't know what. He said, Alcoholics Anonymous is real to me. The 12 steps are real to me. And he said that, and I was like, oh. It made me think, like, how real is this thing to me? How real do I believe in the process of the 12 steps? How bought in am I the fact that my life's so manageable, left up to me, that only a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity, that, I'm ready to have God dictate my thinking, my actions, right? Made the decision, right? Because making a decision is just that. It's just making a decision. I decided I was going to go to the gym today. Did I go? No, you're right. Because I'm lazy and I don't want to. And I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want. That's what I mean. Like, I made, how many, all right, show of hands. Who here when was the last time you said, I'm going to make the decision to not screw up my life anymore? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm going to assume everyone here is doing it. And how many times did you screw up your life after the fact of making that decision? You don't have to raise your hand. It's okay. I can see it. Like, just because I made a decision doesn't mean I did anything. That's what it is, right? That's what the steps are. I love, if you read the book, it's really mean. It is. Like, there's these little snide comments in it. Like, you're like, even those of us who have grave mental disorders can get sober, if only if they have the capacity to be honest. That's like saying, like, yeah, anyone can get sober. You just got to be honest. And maybe it's just me and my perception of the world, but yeah, like, I hate that saying too. It's like, it's not for people who want it. It's not for people who need it. It's for people who do it, right? The action steps. In my opinion, and everything I say about the 12 steps is just my opinion. It's not the way to do AA. It's not like, it's just how I work the steps in my day-to-day life. So please take it with a grain of salt, or whatever that saying is. Right? Like, steps 1, 2, and 3 is just, to me, they were just like understanding steps. Like, am I willing, right? Steps 1, 2, 3. Yeah, do I believe my life is unmanageable, whether I'm drunk or sober? Do I believe that? Yeah, because I've been sober and I constantly relapse. And my life isn't happy even when I'm sober. Okay, cool. Do you believe you're beyond human aid? What do you mean? Oh, well, like, can a girlfriend fix you? Can a family member fix you? Jails, institutions, can death fix you? No, none of those things have been able to fix me yet. Cool, it sounds like to me you're beyond human aid. Congratulations, you just did step 2. I'm so proud of you. Step 3, made a decision, right? We talked about what does it mean to make a decision. Cool, I made the decision. Great. You want to know how you did step 3? And I hear a lot of times people talk about how, man, I'm stuck on that step 3. I just don't know how to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. You know what I tell people? I say, you want to know how you know you did step 3? You start working on step 4. You did it. Congratulations. You did. We all collectively here have done steps 1, 2, and 3. You're almost done. You're almost there. Congratulations. You know, and at first I would always hear people talk about the 4-step. And please, I can talk forever, so just tell me to shut up when I run out of time. But, you know, step 4, I always thought of it as like dry snitching on myself, right? Like some of these things are technically open cases, right? And you guys want me to write it down on paper? You're crazy. But then like, the 4th step is just the roadmap of my life. That's all it is. It's nothing crazy. It's just the roadmap. It's just me on paper, and that's why I'm so scared to write it out, because then it's me. It's real. But if I write down the roadmap of my life, I can see at every which point where selfishness, self-centeredness, fear, resentment, and anger dictated my actions to put me in a position to harm myself or harm other people. I can put my finger on the causes and conditions. And once I understand how I do those things, guess what? I never have to do it again. And if I don't put myself in those positions, I remove the reasons to drink again. Because that's what, alcoholism is just like beer goggles, right? Beer goggles, if you don't know what beer goggles is, you drink and then you look at an ugly person and they're somehow hot, right? Alcoholism is the same thing. But instead of beer, I have goggles that are filtered with fear, anger, and resentment and selfishness that causes me to view the world differently than it really is. It really does. Who here has made a decision based off fear or anger? How'd it work out? Right? Okay, here's a better one. Who here has made a decision based off fear or anger over something that wasn't even real? How'd that work out? I'm going to break up with this girl because she's going to break up with me. I know she is. I'm going to quit this job because I know the boss is going to fire me. So I'm going to quit before he gets the chance to fire me. Dude, I remember, I was in sober living and I started getting high. They drug tested me and they said, Ian, you got to go to detox. You're getting high. And I said, no, I'm not. This is a grave mistake. So I left. And then as I'm leaving, I went to my homie's house and I started getting even more high. And I was like, I'll show them, And then the owner of that sober living calls me back and says, Ian, I'm willing to overlook this. And just, it was a freak accident. It was a false positive. If you come back right now and, drug test, I'll let you come back. And I said, I just don't feel safe there anymore. I just don't feel safe there. I just don't want everyone looking at me and accusing me of something that I never did. The manipulation, right? And somehow deep down, I believed that. God, that's why the 4th and the 5th step is not scary. It's just pointing out how, the reading that Andrew read, even you can see how fear is bracketed alongside the issues with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, and the wife, and the fear, the corroding thread. That's why it was so, because to me, if you were to say, you're like, hey, what are you afraid of? I'm not afraid of anything, dog. Not afraid of nothing. My life was riddled with fear, anger, and resentment, which gave me, again, it drove my perception and gave me the perfect reason to drink again. Drink, drug, whatever. And then I'm back on the street and I only hung out with people who would just glorify the way I lived my life. Dude, I'm not a big guy. I don't really know how to fight and stuff. But I'm never going to let you disrespect me when I'm living out on the street. You know how many times I got into fights that I really lost because I wasn't going to let someone disrespect me. Like, these are the situations I put myself in. And once I became aware of these defects of character, as the big book calls them, and you think too, like, so I'm coming up on 10 years sober, and the only thing time affords you is more experience on how to go through horrible things sober. Honestly. Like, my sponsor's going to hate me if I say this, but here we go. When I got my 5-year chip, every time I get a medallion, my sponsor he'd give me a chip and he would say, Ian's got his year, 2 years. He's got his next year. His recovery can really start now. As he would always tell me. And then I got my 5th year and I'm waiting for him to say it. And he says, Ian, I got to tell you something. I'm so sorry. I got to tell you something. You're at 5 years now. Congratulations. Just a heads up. Most people kill themselves between 5 and 10 years. I don't know if that's true. He's probably joking. Calm down. But I thought he was joking, but I understood. I'm coming up on 10 years, so that was 5 to 10, right? And it was some of the hard, I just got married and all these things. My life got big and full, right? Which, by the way, my wife is a normie and she's hot. What the hell? A normal, good-looking woman thinks I'm normal enough to marry. That's the promises are coming true, guys. Promises of alcoholics. That's what it says in the big book, right? It was insane to me. It still bothers me. I took her to the Orca exhibit today, and we were just like a normal couple. But if she only truly knew the stuff that goes through my head at any given moment, I swear to God. I remember, thank God for my sponsees. Like, Andrew, I love you, man. I get really scared when I get a lot of sponsees all at once, because I usually find that when something horrible in my life is about to happen, God overloads me with a bunch of sponsees. He's like, you're going to be going through something really quick, and I need you to be preoccupied in the service of other people. The real ones are laughing. No. I remember, this thing is, I practiced this thing long enough to thank God. It is a working part of the mind. Not every day, but, I like to think majority of the day, it's a working part of the mind. I remember I had just proposed to my now wife. She said yes. I got poached by this other job, and I quit my job that I was at for 4 years, which, by the way, is another miracle. I was at a job for 4 years. I don't know about you guys, but I've never been fired from a job because I never showed back up. I would get one, maybe half a paycheck, or ask them to pay me in advance, and then I'd be disappeared, right? So the fact that I was at a job for 4 years is a testament to you guys. You guys taught me how to show up for people, how to show up for myself. You guys taught me to show up, whether it's school, work, or whatever, show up a half hour early and go to your teacher or your employer and say, hey, how can I be of service to you? I never completed college. I don't have a college degree. I don't have anything, right? I didn't know how to do my taxes. I didn't even know how to shop for myself. When I first got sober, I would go and get candy, bread, and peanut butter and jelly, right? I didn't know how to take care of myself. And at that job I was at for 4 years, I left there as I was the head of retention, which is insane to me, right? And the reason I was so good at that is because Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys made me a really good listener. You made me empathetic. You made me want to be of service to my fellow man and women. Nah, I remember I left that job on great terms, by the way, which is another insane thing. Like they always said, if, Ian, if you ever want a place back here, you totally can. Like, thank you so much. Which again, I would have never done before. And then so got this new job, and I canceled my health insurance because I was going to get a new job work insurance. And then first day of the job, I hit a deer in my car, totaled my car. But they were like, "Oh, you can have a company car." And I was like, "Oh, great." Within 3 weeks, they had to lay me off, and I got really, really sick. So just dropped a bunch of money on a ring for my now wife. Got really, really sick with no health insurance, so I was bleeding money in doctor's appointments and hospitals, and I had no car. This was 5 years sober. And honestly, like I'm not suicidal, but it was looking pretty good at this point. You know? And I remember I was like 3 days of panic attacks trying to manage my life, trying to finagle and bargain and yada. And then I remember the third day, I literally just, I've been talking with my sponsor and all these other people. And the third day, I just threw up my hands and I said, "All right, God, you take care of this. I don't want to deal with this. I lack the power. I can't deal with this. So you know what? You handle this." Guess what happened? I got a better job and I got another car and the wife didn't leave me. Everything was fine. And even if it wouldn't have been fine, I would have been fine. For the fact that like you guys gave me a lot of tools how to get through really hard stuff. And again, I really want to preface that my sponsees really saved my life. I remember I was like 2 years sober and I went to lunch and I brought one of my sponsees and they brought one of their sponsees, and it hit me. I'm like sitting at this table and I was like, holy hell, like this is crazy. These are dudes who would not have talked to each other. But because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps, they were chopping it up. They were talking about God and spirituality. And I thought about, what the hell am I doing here? Talking about God and spirituality, right? And that's the other thing. I didn't believe in God, or I just believed God didn't believe in me. But I developed a relationship with a power that was greater than me of my own understanding. My own understanding, right? Wasn't from a religious text or a religious group. I found something that worked for me. And so when people get hung up on the God thing, or people, "Oh, the steps aren't going to work for me," my suggestion to you is just work the steps. Don't worry about the God stuff. Don't worry about any of it. Just work the steps. That's it. Because I can't, my sponsor couldn't do this thing for me. My sponsor job was to hold my hand until I was ready to grab the hand of a spiritual concept. That's it. So I don't know, man. It's a really good deal. I could sit up here and talk about just how wonderful Alcoholics Anonymous is, but until you have your own experience with this thing, it's not going to matter. I guarantee you nothing I said here is going to be that light bulb for one of you to be like, "Oh my God, I'm going to get sober. I'm going to stay sober. I'm going to get involved in Alcoholics Anonymous." Like, no, it's just not how it works, man. Like if I would have heard that when I first got sober and I would have just hopped to, I don't know, that would have been great, but it didn't work like that for me, man. Like, unfortunately, I learned at the speed of pain. I had to go through this thing so many times until I was ready to drop my pride and my ego and go up to another man and allow them to help me. And by that way, that guy showed up at my treatment center. He didn't want any money from me. He didn't want anything from me. He just showed up and read a book with me at a time when I really, really needed it. I had no friends, no family, no money. I was filled with fear. And some random dude in a meeting who I really think didn't know my name for the first 6 months, he just showed up. He told me he loved me, which is really weird because I haven't heard that for a long time. I think that's all I got, actually. Thanks so much. Yeah.